I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending Friday, September the 11th. You know, this week started out as a holiday, so we expected it to be kind of slow. Most all your big feeder cattle auctions were closed on Monday, Labor Day there. But then we started out the week on Tuesday with huge gains on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, both live cattle and feeder cattle, especially on the feeder cattle on the out fronts there. And then we saw the results of the big auction they had at Torrington, Wyoming there on Labor Day Monday. They had a big special with about 7,000 head there, and everybody come into the week on a real high note there because everything was going so good. But then it started to peter out there towards the middle of the week, and we saw a couple of days there where we didn't have a whole lot of change in the board or the market, and then we come in on Friday, of course, and the pressure come down on everything. And live cattle on Friday were down $2.35 on the October there, settling at 140.60, which really tightens that basis up to really nothing or just about par there, because that's about what the average will be by the time we get done with all the sales this week. Feeder cattle on Friday, September was down 3 1/4, closed at $200.70 there, and that was down 65 cents for the week. The live cattle are actually up 12 cents for the week. But look at some of the markets this week. Middle of the week, your feeder cattle auctions were $3 to $7 higher than last week because it was so much pressure put on everything last week, and we'd come in there this week and had so much positive things happen. But then by the time we got to your Thursday and Friday auctions, they had leveled back out and just about unevenly steady compared to last week's market. So even though we were up and down, we really didn't lose anything. Your direct feeder cattle markets were fairly light. They were about steady there, and then the trade kind of shut it off out in the country there late in the week after the pressure came back. Calf markets, not a good test really anywhere in the central part of the United States. Down in the southeast where they're selling calves every day, they were steady to $4 lower. But look at that Torrington livestock market there in Wyoming, and look at your cattle market central market report there, and you see how good that market was. We didn't have a comparison for the prior week, but you see how good those weighted average prices are. Had 1,800 head there, weighing 700 to 800 pounds, averaging over 220.50. You know, that's a really strong market. The bad thing is on that is your government market report that's recorded there in Torrington. They flagged nearly 1,000 of those index cattle, or really just the 7 to 8 weights, not counting the 650s, the 7s, and the 8 to 850s. They flagged nearly 1,000 of those 1,800 as fancy, which you think, well, that's not that big a deal, you know, maybe they were fancy. Well, yes, but that pulls those cattle out of the index. So then you don't get any reflection of that big price or that positive market in Chicago on the board, on the Mercantile Exchange, or that really carries through on the live cattle trade and everything. You just don't get any of that whenever you pull those out, and that's really significant. And that's kind of why we think that Cattle Market Central is a better judge of what's going on. If you don't know everything about that, Cattle Market Central is an automated market reporting system. We've got well over 100 sale barns on it right now, and it really it pulls the information. If it's going through the clerk's computer and somebody's writing a check for those cattle, it gets pulled in there, and then we've got a really nice website there where users can go in there and create their own reports. You can look at market reports. You can look at the dashboard, which has the RTI, which is a real-time index, which is put together exactly the same way as the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Cash Feeder Cattle Index. And it's a really, really neat tool you can get on there. You can even put alerts on there if you want to know when a certain weight of cattle reaches a certain level. You can have it send you a text message or an email, and it's just far and beyond has more to offer when you're looking at feeder cattle markets. Look at some other markets there on Cattle Market Central. I had a load of cattle in Knoxville, Iowa, weighed 863 at 205.75, and that's there, you know, really late in the week. And another market there in Coffeyville, Kansas, they had a load of steers weighing 740 at 212.50, and that's about what the market is right now. One of the reasons the feeder cattle were down so hard late in the week is you had that crop production or supply and demand report, a lot of people call it there, that come out on Friday, and it showed that they had made an adjustment this month to what they think the corn crop's going to be, and they adjusted it up just a little bit, or down just a little bit, less than 1%. They're thinking that this year's corn crop's going to be 13.58 billion bushels, which would be about 4% lower than last year's all-time record, but it's still going to be a top 3 crop forever. And you know, it's going to be plenty of corn, but every time they adjust that thing just a little bit, and they adjusted it down to less than 1%, but it really makes those markets turn around. And new crop corn was up 12 3/4 cents on Friday, which that's going to weigh on your feeder cattle quite a bit. But of course, there's a lot of other things weighing on it too. But some of the reason they may have adjusted that a little bit, we had some real heavy rains across the corn belt in the big places where they have a lot of corn this week. Some of it could be damaging. We'll just have to see. But these combines are getting ready to start rolling. They are rolling some, like in southern Missouri and the Boot Hill and some places like that, and they'll make their way, and they'll be full bore here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So you know, once we get that corn in the bin, then we won't see a lot of volatility like we've seen here lately. Your fat cattle market started out with some odd sales there middle of the week on the lower end of last week's price range, you know, right around 140 there in the corn belt. And most of your early sales were in Iowa and a few in Nebraska, but up there where they've got some heavy carcasses, and they've got quite a few cattle that are ready right now. That doesn't mean that our supplies are bigger. They just kind of have a glut of them right now to work through, and a lot of them are heavy. And on the other side of the page, down there in Kansas and Texas, they don't have a lot of cattle that are ready right now. So a lot of those packers are putting wheels under those corn belt cattle and sending them down to the southern plains. But they had early sales there right around 140 and right around 220 dress. But then that pressure come in on Friday, and your late sales in the northern plains were $1 to $3 lower than the early sales, which they were on the lower end of the price range. So we ended up from 137 to 140. Your dressed market was 217 to 219. Kansas sold cattle at 140, which was $3 lower. Texas doesn't sell enough cattle to register. We do have a few up in Colorado up to 142. Your slaughter this week was pretty decent for a holiday week. Maybe not quite as good as some of us had hoped, but they're expecting around 501,000, which is pretty decent a week when you shut down on a Monday, and a lot of Saturday kills are happening. They're expecting the packers to turn that slaughter up just a little bit. Of course, they're very disciplined. They're not going to turn it up enough to where they get short of cattle and have to start giving more for them. But check out DV Auction. We got a lot of bull sales coming up, getting ready to start here for the fall bull sales. You can see this report and more information on the StockExchangeNews.com. So from a home office here near Maysville, Missouri, we'll talk to you next week.